The AAA losers, slop farmers, and absolutely self-entitled failures are still coping and seething about the fact that some games are just better than them. That some games actually have soul. Some games actually, get this, crazy idea for the modern age, but get this. Some games actually try to value the player and their input and their choices. I know, crazy concept. But yes, some games do this, and they succeed.
I've never seen so many people afraid of a game or so detached from reality. You know what players love? They love it when a game developer tells them that their favorite game, one of the most popular and successful and beloved games in the past decade, isn't going to have any impact on how games are made.
Yeah, I thought that they're gonna say that we don't want hot, beautiful looking female characters and ripped masculine men. Damn.
Just because you like it doesn't mean we're going to learn anything from it. Why would we do that? That makes too much sense.
Yes, but technically and ironically, kind of based in all the wrong ways.
Always viewed Baldur's Gate 3 as a cultural turning point. It was a game that was so far a cut above the rest. It was so fair to the players. It was so jam-packed full of value that by contrast, it just made the rest of the industry look goofy. Players are looking at some of these other games and saying, what are you guys doing over here? I think it showed a lot of people, it opened their eyes to what a AAA game should be.
Yeah. After Baldur's Gate 3, My Little Pony Friendship is an Adventure, the MMORPG, does not feel the same. It just doesn't.
What their money is actually worth, and it reminded them what it feels like to be the priority when a game is made. So imagine my dismay when I find another game developer, a well-known game developer, talking about how Baldur's Gate 3 is an unrealistic standard.
Is it Blizzard? Is it Blizzard this time? Or Blizzard already said their prayers and just fucked off into the night?
The rest of this industry just will not be able to reach. And to be honest, that's actually relatively accurate. But they're trying to set a standard. They're trying to tell us what that standard truly is. Trying to lower our expectations. You know, it's funny. The standard is only unrealistic when it's us that's asking for it. But before that, a word from today's sponsor.
Sponsor? Raycon? They're not sponsoring me, so the product is bad.
I owe a lot to Baldur's Gate 3. If it weren't for Larian Studios and the hundreds of hours I've now spent in their game, I don't think I would have understand what modern games could be, what they should be, how players deserve to be treated, what fairness looks like, how a budget can be used efficiently, how a team can manage itself effectively, and what happens when a studio genuinely understands its audience. In fact, most of the commentary and critique that I've done on this channel started with a video called Baldur's Gate 3 is a wake-up call. That's now over a year ago. Don't go and watch.
Yeah, damn, man. You know, after that, there have been 257 billion wake-up call videos. Oof. What is this one called? They are terrified of this game and won't let it go. Damn. That should have been called it's a wake-up call how terrified they are.
It or anything. I was incredibly dramatic and I didn't have a beard at the time, but it was the first moment that I had realized just how far gone this industry was, and it was the first time that I found my voice as a creator. Now, the video that I had made was focused on a piece from GameDeveloper.com titled Yelling is Not Journalism, and it was a plea for empathy after pushback from a series of viral tweets where indie developers were asking players not to compare their game to Baldur's Gate 3, which on its own was a pretty harmless request. Nobody's out here screaming.
On its own, it's not a harmless request. That is absolutely just delusional. Say that, hey, here's this thing that's really good, and here's our fucking slop pile of absolute dung. How about you don't compare them? Because, I mean, I didn't try on my slop pile of dung, but man, I don't want to still feel bad. It is insane to request and tell people, oh, you can't compare us to good stuff. We have more money, more people, more everything. But we make worse stuff and we demand more respect and love and adoration and we cost more. But don't call us out on that. That is an absolute crazy thing to do. It is borderline completely out of the human purview even to be that insanely detached from reality to say that.
Why can't Schedule 1 let me romance?
And that's why people hated that. That's why people hated those takes so much. This is why these developer takes exploded so hard, because the developers were the only people who thought, oh no, I'm just saying a reasonable thing. Everyone else saw it for what it truly is, arrogance of the highest degree.
Brad, like Baldur's Gate 3 lets me romance a bear. That was never the issue. The issue was who responded to those tweets. Senior level AAA developers, producers, directors chiming in to say the exact same thing, that Baldur's Gate 3 was an impossible standard, that it's unfair to compare other games to it, which in hindsight was basically a soft confession, because some of those developers, like Josh Sawyer of Obsidian and Chris Balzer of Blizzard, would then go on to release games like Avowed or Diablo 4. After seeing those games, I get why they don't want.
Oh, Avowed is so sad it's already dead. Died in literally less than 3 days.
Want to make the comparison. The article itself tried to explain why we get broken, unfinished games, why DLC and microtransactions are necessary for them to finish them, why you, the paying customer, should feel empathy for these studios when you don't get what you paid for, as if being ripped off is just a part of the process and understanding it is somehow going to make it okay. It was without question one of the most tone-deaf attempts at gaslighting and damage control that I've seen from both the media and game developers, and it was all sparked by how popular Baldur's Gate 3 became. Despite launching right next to Starfield, it completely eclipsed it. It peaked over 875,000 concurrent
Well, to be fair, Starfield literally died in 2 weeks, though.
players on Steam and sold 15 million copies in its first year, a global phenomenon that no one, except the people that were playing it in early access, like.
By the way, that means how powerful word of mouth was for this. Because typically you add a 0 to this number, and that's effectively your estimated sales, plus minus 50%, depending on, you know, how people feel about the game, what's the consensus on the internet, what kind of videos are made. But this is not 50%. Now, 900k well, 915 million copies sold is that's a fucking huge difference. That is almost two times the estimate. That is an insane accomplishment.
And sold 15 million copies in its first year, a global phenomenon that no one, except the people that were playing it in early access, like myself, could see coming. What no one could have predicted, though, is how long that momentum would last. Baldur's Gate 3 has probably sold over 20 million copies by now. It's still at the center of almost every conversation about games, and somehow
it's still, yeah, if he was not going to show it, I was going to show it. Yeah, this is insane. It is still retaining so much players. This is insane. About this point, you would expect there to be maybe like 20 players, but no, not at all.
Nearly 2 years after release, it's still averaging over 100,000 players on Steam as a single-player game. That number just spiked again with the release of Patch 8. When a game has that kind of staying power, that kind of cultural significance, it makes perfect sense why developers feel threatened. And of course, they're doing what they all.
And by the way, there's a huge difference between single-player game and multiplayer game. For example, some people would like to say that Fallout 76 is doing good because it has like 15k players or something, which is not that bad. But then you need to remember, half of them are probably bots. Because yeah, buying items is popular nowadays in online games, and well, you can buy a lot of items in, what do you want to do? Farm for 200 hours for an uncertain drop, maybe it's a 50-50 after those $200 that you get it, or do you just want to buy it for $20? A lot of people choose buy it for $20, okay, and that creates a lot of requirements for botting. So when you look at those games and you think, wow, 15k is a success, like in the case of Fallout 76. You need to remember that most likely half of the player base is actually bots.
Always do when something makes them look bad, downplay it, deflect, and gaslight players into thinking that it was never realistic to begin with. I came across an article from PC Gamer titled "Former BioWare Producer Says."
I love, by the way, these stupid takes. Not realistic, but happens anyway in real life. How is it non-realistic to happen, but it happens?
Baldur's Gate 3's impact on game dev will be somewhat muted thanks to industry convention, and I can't help but think we got it all backwards. In it, we get a summary of a YouTube video by Mark Dara, former BioWare executive producer and consultant
Oh no, this idiot. You have watched him. This guy's insane.
on Dragon Age the Veilguard. In that video, Dara makes the case that Baldur's Gate 3 may have been wildly successful, but its influence on the broader industry will be minimal, muted, to use his term. Dara opens by making the argument that sometimes there are games that sell very well, but ultimately don't really have an impact on the overall game development landscape, or games in general in terms of what gets made. But also, the reverse happens as well. Games that were not as successful had an impact on the game industry much larger than their initial impact. And
Okay, so he doesn't explain anything. One of the reasons this happens is because if you're a big AAA studio and you suddenly just admit, oh, Baldur's Gate 3 did everything right, it's successful, blah 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 blah, Larry on good, you're effectively admitting that you're trash. You're admitting that you are not capable of doing the same as they, and that's bad. That's effectively saying to your employer, hey, I'm shit at my job. Want to fire me? Yeah, people are not going to accept that. And obviously, the leaders of these studios, the CEOs, are going to be like, no, shareholders, listen, Baldur's Gate 3 just some kind of luck of the roll type of situation. We don't need to change anything. We're already doing maximum returns and shit like that. So, yeah, they literally can't admit that Baldur's Gate 3 is good and that they should adopt their principles. Because if they do that, they are just kind of asking themselves to be fired.
sure, in a vacuum, that's technically true. He brings up examples like KOTOR, Mass Effect, which define genres but weren't colossal financial successes. But then he brings up Defense of the Ancients, Dota of all games, as a game that is overshadowed by its legacy, despite it inspiring countless copycats while still being one of the most played games.
Overshadowed by its legacy. Wait, how does that even work as a concept? Because League of Legends is not its legacy, but League of Legends was the more popular game by far. By the way, again, I'm a Dota player in general, but yeah, still League of Legends kind of fucking slapped Dota when it comes to. So is that its legacy? Is that what it gets overshadowed by?
On Steam. And for me, that's where that logic completely collapses on itself, because he turns around and argues that Baldur's Gate 3, a game that sold over 15 million copies, swept every Game of the Year award, and is now still one of the most played games on Steam years after its release. Somehow that game
16% chance to misses. Oof.
Won't have a comparable influence like KOTOR or Mass Effect, because the game is too much of an anomaly. According to him, in the case of Baldur's Gate 3, it looks like the perfect storm of factors working together to make this game work, some of which are externalities that aren't.
Please. This already sounds like one of those stupid, oh, but it has the D&D license for it. Don't. Just don't be that much of an idiot. It's the same thing as the Marvel Snap is good because it has the Marvel license. Everyone here knows that doesn't influence how successful a game is.
Something another studio can replicate. So let me get this straight. The only reason why you believe that Baldur's Gate 3 won't influence the industry is because you believe it's a one-time thing that nobody else could achieve? That's not nuance. That's deflection. Dara then starts pointing out those external factors, and you guys want to take a wild guess as what they're going to be? Oh, it's because it had the Dungeons & Dragons license.
Yep.
That's what it is. He says it's using the Dungeons & Dragons IP at arguably the peak of its popularity in service of making something.
Peak of its popularity? Like, what? That alone is kind of stupid, because Dungeons & Dragons is not at the peak of anything. Dungeons & Dragons is an IP that's kind of just around, but no one really cares.
That replicates the experience of playing D&D at the tabletop. I'm sorry, guys, but what does that have to do with anything? Now you're talking about why you think the game was popular and why it sold well in a broader discussion on how it will impact games in the future. Red herring moment, but okay, shows how little you understand the situation. So where was all that magic when Dark Alliance launched? Or Sword Coast Legends? Or Chronicles of Mystara? They all had the D&D branding too, but they all completely flopped. Gotham Knights had Batman, Avengers had Marvel, Suicide Squad had the entire DC brand.
Yeah.
None of them
I mean, the DC brand sucks. Everyone knows that. That arguably was a negative. But yes, I mean, everyone here knows that this is an absolute a lie and cope. Probably more a lie than cope because these people lie for a living. They know that that being a lie full deceitful shit is way better than actually saying the truth in their situation. So they're gonna lie.
Succeeded because branding doesn't make the game, execution does. D&D isn't what sold Baldur's Gate 3, quality did. Then we get to the most frustrating part, Dara's soft insinuation that Larian's budget made the whole thing possible. He says, it really isn't about having a ginormous budget or having a long time to develop, though it did have a very comfortable budget, and it did have a long time to develop. Excuse me.
Dude, what are these fucking Asmongold tier sentences saying yes and no at the same time? Like, what the hell is this?
It did have a very comfortable budget, and it did have a long time to develop. Excuse me, what? So it really isn't about that, but it actually is all about that? What are you talking about? You know, this all sounds harmless until you realize how misleading it is. Larian made Baldur's Gate 3 for around $100 million over the course of 7 years. That includes marketing, QA, everything. Compare that to the $200 million or $300 million budgets we've seen out of Ubisoft.
Nowadays, nowadays I don't think a AAA title goes for less than 400 mil.
EA, Activision, Blizzard, and more for games that are shipping broken, unfinished, and utterly lifeless. Dragon Age the Veilguard was into...
Now, to be absolutely fair, though, Baldur's Gate 3 did launch with a lot of bugs and a lot of fixing was needed. Granted, you know, when Starfield launched, when Dragon Age Veilguard launched, when Assassin's Creed Shadows launched, they completely ignored the bugs. They didn't even say anything about the bugs, and the way that they fixed bugs was, oh, here's a patch with 3 fixes from who 2 probably don't work once a month. And that was it. Larian was pumping out massive fucking light novel-sized patches every, when Baldur's Gate 3 released, like, pretty much every week. I think there was a massive bug fix patch, with like 2 or 3 days in. But after that, they pretty much just released a patch this big with only just bug fixes and things like that for like 3 months or so. It was insane. They tried. These AAA companies didn't try. It is one thing to release a product that's broken and bad. Fallout New Vegas was extremely broken when it was released. No Man's Sky literally didn't fucking work. Cyberpunk 2077 was a shithole, but all of these games took their time and fixed it, okay? New Vegas became playable. Same exact deal with Cyberpunk 2077. Became playable, became updated, got revamps and things like that. 10 out of 10. New things even got added for free. And then a really good DLC. And No Man's Sky now is... People don't talk about it enough, but No Man's Sky at this point is actually one of the most fucking impressive games out there. It is actually purely insane how much shit they have in there. And they are still going, by the way. No Man's Sky, I think, has like an average 20k players every day, which is, again, insane.
Development for 10 years. You worked on that, Dara. I guarantee you spent more than $100 million. What happened there? This isn't about money, it's about competent leadership and knowing what your audience actually wants. He then goes on to bring up the so-called untouchable games, ones that he claims that the industry quietly acknowledges but then walks away from. According to him, what actually happened for the most part is the industry acknowledges the existence of games like Grand Theft Auto 5, acknowledges the existence of games like The Wind Waker, but then sets them aside and allows them to be their own things off on their own, and not attempt to make games that are directly competitive with them. This is one of the most historically...
That's a lie.
...inaccurate things that I think I've ever read from a developer. Grand Theft Auto 5 literally wrote the book on live service monetization. It changed how nearly every studio has handled online content, microtransactions, and engagement loops. Beyond that, he's strawmanning a single title's release and not the broader impact of the entire series. While Grand Theft Auto 5 exploded, Every single Grand Theft Auto game is done well. And without Grand Theft Auto, we don't have Watch Dogs or Mafia. We don't get Cyberpunk 2077.
Well, to be fair, we could easily live in a world without Watch Dogs. That franchise is shit.
I mean, if you want more recent examples, what about Breath of the Wild? That game reshaped exploration and traversal mechanics in open world games. You can see its fingerprints on everything from Genshin Impact to Immortals Phoenix Rising to Sonic Frontiers to just about any game out there. And here's where Dara tries to put a
Really? I haven't played any Zelda games because I'm not gay. But do they actually have that much impact? I mean, I think Zelda hasn't done anything unique in forever. The construction thing is kind of cool-ish, but also that's not even unique.
bow on the argument. And he says that in the case of Baldur's Gate 3, you would expect a 30 out of 10 impact. And we may see something more like a 5 or 6. It'll have impact. It'll influence RPGs going forward. I just expect that influence will be somewhat muted. And there it is. There's the narrative they want to push. Yes, Baldur's Gate 3 was great, but don't get your hopes up. It's not going to change anything. And of course they're saying that because if it did change anything, if it did become the standard, well, then they would have to answer why their games aren't measuring up. And they're not ready to do that because they would have to admit that the problem isn't the genre. It's not the audience.
Finally, Legendary Drops has paid attention to what I have been telling him for such a long time. Jesus. Thank you. Thank you for finally seeing the light that I bring.
It's not the budget, it's them. I genuinely feel like the industry at large is trying to purposefully misinterpret the players. Impact does not mean carbon copies. It means shifts in design philosophy, genre expectations, and audience demand. All of those things that have already been triggered by Baldur's Gate 3. Players are already asking why other RPGs are not giving them the same level of freedom, polish, or respect. But Dara and many others want to paint this game as unreachable, not to temper expectations, but to create distance. They want to put up a wall between them and accountability, because if this game really is just some lightning in a bottle moment, then they don't have to learn anything from it. They can keep doing what they're doing. They can keep burning hundreds of millions of dollars on trash, talentless games while insisting that they're giving players exactly what they want. I mean, this is exactly why Baldur's Gate 3 hit the way that it did. It wasn't just good, it was a revelation. It was a game that made people realize what had been stolen from them over the past decade. All the systems that had been stripped away, all the content that had been turned into DLC or microtransactions, all the bugs, crashes, delays, and half.
Okay, listen. What you would choose, boys, here, okay? This thing,
finished promises.
This thing with these teeth, these filed teeth, giving you a blowjob, or the fiery woman that literally exists from flame, and you have no fire protection potion. What do you choose? What do you risk? I personally, I think I take the goblin because it's kind of safer. I think, even though that's like it's kind of safer, but you kind of 100% know that the outcome is you losing it. But the fired one is like more problems, I feel,
Suddenly, they had something that respected their time, their money, and their intelligence, and you better bet they're going to remember that. This wasn't some niche project that hit harder than expected. This was the market correcting itself. This was players saying enough. And the fact that we have some developers that can look at that and still say this won't change anything is honestly surreal. Let's stop acting like Baldur's Gate 3 is in some untouchable bubble. Let's stop acting like it didn't leave a crater in the ground the size of a small country. Its success will shape this industry. Maybe not overnight, maybe not in ways we can immediately measure, but chronically, absolutely. And trying to deny that is...
Well, it's obviously going to shape a lot of things because, the AAA losers can't pretend that this is not a thing. They can pretend that this is not here. But they cannot stop us from constantly comparing now everything to Baldur's Gate 3. When the ante gets increased, it increases and everyone compares it to the new thing, okay? That's just how it happens. They can't stop us, and that's the most important part. We will compare games now to the quality of Baldur's Gate 3 and, similar things. And they are powerless. We own all the power.
Especially if you're a developer working on RPGs, that's not humility, it's fear, and we can smell it. At the end of the day, players do not want to hear, we can't do that. They want to hear, we're going to learn from this. They want to hear that the success of Baldur's Gate 3 lit a fire under somebody's ass, that it got meetings canceled, that it got ideas reevaluated, that maybe, just maybe, someone finally asked, are we actually making something good? But I guess that would require some real introspection, and clearly, for some people in this industry, that's just too high of a standard. I don't think that there is a game that is more loved and feared than Baldur's Gate 3. It is wild to me that you would look at a game that is the first game ever in history to win every single Game of the Year award, and you're somehow thinking that that game isn't going to impact games in the future.
Well, to be fair, the Game of the Year award kind of literally doesn't matter. It's typically reserved for either PlayStation or Xbox, or typically divided amongst themselves. Because, again, the Game of the Year award is literally just designed to make money. By the way, more popular than the Super Bowl. Not that that's actually popular. Americans just don't understand the world. It's actually not even remotely popular. But still, the Game Awards are the biggest non-sports awards that exist. They're bigger than music awards because, I mean, Taylor Swift is going to hit the wall sooner or later. Probably she already has, so there's that. All the other ones are boring, dull, and fat. It is what it is. And thus, it's a miracle that Baldur's Gate won everything. Still. Because again, typically it's saved for only Sony and Xbox games, so, their sponsors are really happy. But Baldur's Gate 3 was such a unanimous success that even the Games Awards couldn't actually lie and give their thing to something else.
Future. I'm immediately remembering all the conversations back about a year ago where they're talking about the scope, the fidelity, all the choices that you have, trying to strawman these arguments on what player expectations are. Guys, for some odd reason, we can't do it. What's the D&D IP? That's what it has to be. Yeah, see, we can't do it because of the D&D IP. Sorry about that. Yeah. All of it. Literally all of it, ignoring what the player's expectations really are, where that shift in expectations went. It wasn't fidelity. It wasn't scope. It wasn't how long you could play the game. It was the fact that players got their money out of a game that they bought.
Well, to be fair, I don't think that has ever changed. That has always been my primary concern when I buy a game. Will this be worth my time? Will this be good enough? Will I remember it? Will this be fun? Is this worth AAA slop price? The typical answer is about wasn't, but still. Anyway, that was Legendary Drops 10 out of 10. Bye!